Hello, this is the Harboring Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. Feedback is immensely important. Feel free to reach out, and the best way to do so is through email. So I'm pretty much on all the different types of podcast platforms, so it won't be hard to find me. And also, on YouTube here, if you want to fill up comment, want to like and subscribe, please feel free to do so. All right, so continuing out the aspects of fashion and everything, I am going to focus on the aspects of models and implementing fashion and how that changed the course of history with fashion. Here we go. Okay, so there's a lot that I'm going to talk about here and then end with facts. All right, so I'm going to tell you the focal points and then start talking. So I'm going to focus in on the aspects of, go into more depth that I mentioned last week when I talked about models and the image and it being changed. And then go in and talk about advertisement, then talk about the 90s, and then get into my thoughts. Get into my thoughts about these are the focus of the thoughts, and then get into facts. That's what it actually is there with the source that I found. Okay, so as I mentioned, so to add on to that, with the aspects of what I was talking about last week here, when I was talking about magazines. So, it was more in the avenue of the aspects of showcasing, sort of like a formal attire to go to like a tea luncheon or something. And, this is just from my point of view. And then, showing you the wares or so up for that certain season. And so when the notable attraction to more fast wear or ready to wear became into play, that's when the aspects of fashion started to focus in on more of a mainstream appeal of people. And then, as I said, with models like Twiggy and so forth, and then, getting into the 90s with Kate Moss, I'll talk about that later. That, again, these were focal points in the aspects of what was meant about the look of a model in fashion. Because Twiggy specifically was the mod look where it was implement of the mood of the time, out on the town, just really where it's happening, and then you get into the aspects of the boho chic, so forth, with the bohemian, later, you can say with bridging the gap between the beatniks, the hipsters, and so forth, and how, all those images really recall into the aspects of a certain feel of bridging the gap between conventional wear and thinking between more modern edge. And so, for the part of it, that's what models in fashion are supposed to do. They're supposed to, excuse me, sorry about that. They're supposed to implement on a certain feel that you get by these images being associated with something. And so this aspects of youth and change and not being so adult looking when it comes to the aspects of fashion started to revolve itself and define itself more, as we go on into the other decades. Now, with the beginning, here of where it becomes with what you would call the modern model or so, from my point of view, I think, even further you go back and look towards the Versailles, or look towards the French, and I mean, that goes without saying with French and fashion. That's just something like talking about the aspects of water and the aspects of air. That's that's just something that commingles together, And so when you get into the course and the Versailles and get into the all of the Marie Antoinette, you get into the Louis the 14th and so many other different variations of the monarchy, and then even in the time of I see it's just Napoleon Bonaparte, even in his time when he was really being truly being fascist and a dictator here. Out of rebellion, people were implementing the aspects of fashion, when you get in the aspects of miming and the way that was implemented with the restrictions that the Bonaparte was putting upon the people. And then, in getting the aspects of how the everyday the everyday people were wearing versus the more upscale people and so forth, that was changing too. And so going back to the monarchy and so forth, the elaborate wear, the very intricate attention to detail, that really changed the course of different things that can be associated with fashion. When you get in the aspects of a corset, you get in the aspects of wearing so many layers, the reasons to wear so many different layers. And it's quite interesting that layers became a creation out of necessity to hide, certain orders, because even at that time with the aspects of being affluent and having money, it was still prominent that the aspects of bathing and so forth, it wasn't an everyday process here. And so a lot of different, again, images and a lot of different accessories and so forth came out of, those very foundational beginnings here. And so going back into, after the 60s, going into the 70s, 80s, and so forth, it started to ever change the aspects of everyday wear. The stronghold power of the department store and the aspects of saving pennies and what you could wear on if you want to go on a night out of the town, you gotta work 9 to 5, and then being able to be versatile where an outfit can set all of those moods. And so out of this, marketeers and the economy and the business market started to pay more and more attention, because women, particularly women, and it's a powerhouse of fashion here, whether that it can be said otherwise that women don't have that much power. That's just not true. In the aspects of different assorted things in society. And, so many different trends and the aspects of more traditional, slow down, paced, tailored wear started to not be so prevalent. Even the aspects of the textiles started to change, specifically when we get into the 70s, the aspects of rayon, the aspects of polyester, that was, prevalent in the whole association with the sort of wear that was going on in that particular time era. You get more redefined aspects of the mod look, the shag look, as really what it was when get in the 70s, when you get into Jane Fonda and the way that she was dressing and so many assorted other people. And so with the 80s coming about, you get that was about the big boom of the malls being associated with fashion too and trends, and then even more associated with the teenage buying power too. And that started to change the way in which models looked, in the way in which fashion started to emulate and go with the trends. You get more bright colors here. You get more of the aspects of bangles, sort of like the accessories with a lot of bracelets here. You get the cutoff. Well, with movies was very implemented in the aspects of the way people were looking, and that even goes further back in the aspects when we go the talkies versus the silent films, and that gave a lot of power into the aspects of fashion too and what to wear. Getting back with baggy sweaters in the 80s, with the aspects of really skin tight jeans, and you get sneakers are more prevalent in the aspects of wear versus the trends with adults. When we get with women and men, is more of a nuanced, polished look. When you get in the aspects of the business attire of women were becoming more implemented, being more wanting to seek after higher and higher roles. So you get more business attire suits for women. And then, when you get in the aspects of men attire, of course, business suits goes hand in hand with that. But on the aspects of more casual wear, nautical wear, with the trend of the preppy versus the rebel type and so on and so forth. With you get the Fifth Avenue chic, and then, you get the trend of more sportswear when you get in notation of a show like Miami Vice. And that really set the scene for the implement of fashion with the trend of merging the gap with that. And then also, that was another means of implementing the aspects of how important television shows and music goes hand in hand with being an influence on fashion, and also an influence of the certain aesthetic of the look of the 80s here. I can say specifically with men's attire here. And then the sound of the 80s too, with the soundtrack of that show alone. Alright, so when you get into the 90s, now it started to be more of a trend to where supermodels were becoming household names. So that's quite interesting. So now I'm just going to speak on what I think, and then I'm going to get into the facts. So, as the 80s ended, and then, you get on to the 90s here, it was more and more prevalent to the aspects of the consumer power of everyone, specifically with moms, specifically with young adult women, transitioning into, high school to college, and then on to working. They're having careers and stuff like that. It was implemented, with the wave of female empowerment, wave of, hey, I want to, be my own boss, be my own self, have this life that I want, and then, settle down whenever I choose so. All right, so that was prevalent, pretty much, the air of the way of the time. And so what this meant was that advertisers were really in play along this decade here. And so that's when, you see, and it goes without saying, hey, why don't we craft the imagery of advertising so we can attract people into looking at models in a different light. And so the specific model can attend to be associated with these assorted clothing. And so that was very clever in itself. So you have Linda Evangelista, you have Naomi Campbell, you have Cindy Crawford, and the list goes on. But these three women were the most impeccable images when you think about the 1990s in fashion. And why so? Because they were, they were, beautiful women, but they weren't so off-putting. They were they were approachable looking. And so merging them together with product placement, or in the case of Cindy Crawford, when she decided to, move on in her career and do other things when she went to MTV and so forth. It gave more of an insider view of the aspect of the world of fashion, and that young women and women alike, took a liking to that. And so it's really easy to see how the aspects of supermodels, became very prevalent in household names in the 1990s. So with this said, I am going to get down into the facts of the matter about what I am talking about here. Okay. All right. So it says here. So, supermodel, a very famous and successful fashion model, often recognized by their first name. So, only supermodels are financially successful and culturally significant. Now, they have high visibility, which is earned by being featured on the covers of multiple fashion magazines simultaneously. So, walking the runway for leading designers and signing lucrative contracts with fashion houses and beauty brands. So, the cultural phenomenon of supermodels. Oh, I'm sorry. And then Kate Moss in the aspects. I didn't mean to leave her out here. Again, it was a lot that I was addressing here. So Kate Moss was in itself. She implemented another trend about the aspects of fashion and the idea of thinness here. Now, Twiggy started the notion with the aspects of being waif and thin looking. But Kate Moss and herself here, she superseded that by being coined the phrase of heroin chic. So what did that mean? That means being emaciated looking to where it looked unhealthy, but it became, fashionably looking. And so, in that self, that started a different trend of the subculture, or I guess you can get seediness here, sort of getting becoming more mainstream looking, to where these assorted images is associated with being in the underbelly of something, but it changed and redefined the aspects of what conventional beauty can be. And so, again, that is clever, because Calvin Klein and the marketeers behind Calvin Klein ran with that, and that they put themselves on the forefront of controversy. And so Kate Moss was the imagery and the winning force behind really implementing that out. All right, so Cindy Crawford, Kate Moss, and Naomi Campbell became household names, which took off in the 80s and continued through the 90s. Though the word supermodel is largely associated with female models, several male models have also been influential when you get into the aspects of Fabian, Jason Bedford, Mark Vanderloo, and David Gandy. All right, so before the 1990s. Now, this is quite interesting what they're talking about Janice Dickinson. Now, Janice Dickinson, for what it's worth, she did have a lot of implementing the aspects of modeling. But, she decided to take the route of the reality TV show. But let's see what they have to say. So, in 2023, Janice Dickinson told the online magazine Queentery, there are, of course, other supermodels that were before me. But back in 1982, my agent said, "You are working night and day, day and night. Who do you think you are, Superman?" And I said, "No, honey, I'm a supermodel. And you'll refer to me as supermodel." So we started a supermodel division that only took girls that did catalog, runway, editorial, advertising, and spokesperson. So the modern use of supermodel first appeared in the 1940s, when an article in the Chicago Tribune appeared with the headline, "Supermodels are assigned for a fashion show." and was used to describe Twiggy, Jean Shrimpton, Verskaska. I'm sorry for the pronunciation here. I think it might be Slavic or Russian, I'm not quite sure. And other models in the 60s. Again, 60s redefining the aspects here about models and fashion here in their place. All right, so model Janice Dickinson claims that she coined it in 82. So Dickinson also claimed to be the first supermodel, though Lisa Forngreaves, a Swedish model who worked from the 30s to the 50s, is usually given the distinction. Other early supermodels include Doreen Lay, Bettina, Carmen Del Orfrinsky, and Susie Parker. Black models began gaining prominence in the late 1960s. Donnelly Luna is regarded as the first black supermodel, whose success was followed by Iman and Beverly Johnson in the 70s. While the 1960s and 70s had seen their fair share of well-known models, the true cultural cachet of supermodels did not emerge until the 80s, when models began garnering not only more fame but also more financial success. So the rise of the supermodel coincided with the public's growing interest in fashion, allowing some models to shed the anonymity of being associated with the role in previous decades and to gain attention for their work. Additionally, competition among modeling agencies and incentivized a push for magazines to put supermodels' names in their editorials. The emergence of supermodels also thrust modeling agencies such as the Ford and Elite model agencies into prominence. One moment that captured the growing media interest in supermodels took place in 1990 when 5 up-and-coming supermodels, Crawford, Campbell, and Linda Evangelista, Tajina Patiz, and Christy Turlington appeared on the cover of British Vogue, photographed by Peter Lynchburg. These 5 supermodels, who became known as the Big Five, would go on to star in the music video for pop singer George Michael for the song Freedom, 1990 entitled. Well, the hit. It's a song, but, hit there. So the following year, all but Patiz walked the runway together to the song at a Versace couture show, Gianni Versace couture show, eliciting having a standing ovation, which helps to establish the model as celebrities in their own right. Shortly after, Crawford starred in a Super Bowl advertisement for Pepsi, and I remember that ad where which I don't understand this aspects of having little boys, looking, oh, look at her, she's so pretty, oh my gosh, man, that taboo of they're only little boys and they're looking at this gorgeous woman any kind of way. So, hey, yeah, it's that in itself too. Super Bowl ads are very impactful when it's in these sort of images that you want to portray about a certain product. Is done or executed correctly and strategically. So high-profile moments help establish the models as celebrity in their own right. So shortly after, as I said, the Crawford started the Super Bowl advertisement for Pepsi, and Campbell played pop star Michael Jackson's love interest in a music video for 1991 song In the Closet. And in 1993, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York, named Turlington the face of the 20th century and used her likeness for a line of mannequins. Now, and I'm going to go into milestones. So Susie Parker in the late 50s first made $100,000 a year. Lauren Hutton in 69 first to sign an exclusive deal with a beauty brand, Revlon. So, Marguerite Hemingway in 75. Margaret or Hemingway in 75 was the first to sign a $1 million contract to advertise with Fabre perfume. Beverly Johnson in the 70s was the first black girl or black woman for Vogue and French elite. So Inez de la Frenchie in 83 was the first model who was exclusively signed to the House of Chanel. And in 1988, Naomi Campbell was the first black cover girl for French Vogue. So the 1993 hit song Supermodel, You Better Work by drag queen and singer RuPaul names Crawford, Campbell, Evangelista, and Turlington, as well as Claudia Schiffer, who is sometimes considered part of the Big Five, in place of Patisse and Nikki Taylor by their first name only, demonstrating the renown that these top supermodels possessed during the era. So Turlington, Campbell, Evangelista, who were often booked together, became known as the Holy Trinity. Other prominent supermodels throughout the decade include Kate Moss, Helena Christensen, Yasmin Garu, Ellie Mackinsphere, Tyra Banks, Kimberly Simmons, and Nadi Aruman, and Alec Week, and Heidi Klum. So the turn of Big Five was expanded to the Big Six and included Campbell, Turlington, Evangelista, Crawford, Schiffer, and Moss. Emmy is widely acknowledged as the first plus-size model and was featured in a 1994 edition of the People's 50 Most Beautiful list. Now, plus size was quite different than what plus size is of today, and so romance with leading musicians such as Jerry Hall and Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones, Stephanie Seymour and Alex Rose, of Guns N' Roses, Iman and David Bowie, and Christy Brinkley and Billy Joel, some much as Milia Djokovic and Amber Vitala transitioned to acting careers. So, Linda Evangelista infamously once said, "We don't wake up for less than $10,000 a day." So perhaps the most salient quality of a supermodel is their financial success. So Turlington set a record in 1989 when, at the age of 20, she signed a 7-figure modeling deal with Calvin Klein. That year, Crawford secured a multi-million-dollar contract with Revlon Cosmetic in 1995 and was named the top earning model in the world by Forbes. Now, supermodels also greatly influence fashion and beauty trends in their eras, not just reflecting existing styles, but creating and popularizing new ones. For instance, Evangelista cropped her hair, and she was nicknamed the Linda, which was widely imitated. Now, the aspects of going back to that $10,000 a day quote here. So that's, another aspects of implementing the mystique and the power behind the image and the brand of being a supermodel. But at the same time, here, that's quite clever because it, again, is revamping, hyping up the lucrative, hold on, let me write that. The lucrative life you can have of being a supermodel if you want to or seek it after that. And that's really clever in the aspects. of everything. But, there's a line in the sand of that, of, knowing where your priorities lay. And that in itself, for young girls and young women, that's where that is associated with the impact of, how your home life, of how your parents, that goes hand in hand with your parent, your guardian, and so forth. And then, you can't place the blame on that and say, oh, that's a degradation of why young girls or young women or can be vapid or so forth. You can't place blame onto that. That has a lot to do with many assorted other things, with saying just, that knee-jerk reaction to that. It just boils down to home values and, how that's placed. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be fashionable or, look towards these things and so forth. It's just a fine line with that. And also at the same time here, going to this too, that's what was really impactful, I think, about the House of Style and Cindy Crawford having that role, and then MTV, implementing and trying to give a new definition about the aspects of supermodels, because, then itself, and then Linda Evangelista was on that show quite often, and so was Naomi Campbell and other supermodels. And then, you got a more of a one-on-one, I guess, more one-on-one point of view about their disposition, about their self and fashion. And so you don't, again, see things from the one perspective. And that's what was really good about the 90s. There was a lot of opportunities to see things from different point of views if you choose to seek it. All right, so in the 20th century, now the phenomenon of the supermodel started to die down in the late 1990s, when fashion magazines began opting for Hollywood celebrities to pose for their covers, and fashion designers sought a more uniform look for their runway shows. However, supermodels such as Gisele Bündchen and Adriana Lima, both Brazilian, and the Victoria's Secret runway models known as Angels, found success in the 2000s. Others who achieved supermodel status during this time included Natalie Ovata, excuse me for the pronunciation, I'm going to do my very best, Bontanova, and Dulcin Cruz, and Alexandria Ambrose. In the 2010s and beyond, models with famous families such as Kendall Jenner and sisters Gigi Hadid and Bella Hadid were successful, and were models such as Carly Klaus and Joan Smalls and Lu Wen, daughters of supermodels from the 1990s such as Kaya Geber, Crawford's daughter, and Leah Moss, Moss's daughter, have also gained runway and print fame. So the enduring fascination with supermodels was evident when Crawford, Campbell, Schaefer, Christian, and Carly Bündchen walked the Versace runway show together in 2017. So in 2023, Campbell, Crawford, Evangelista, and Turlington appeared in the Apple TV documentary series in The Supermodels. So Del Orfris, whose career began in the 1940s, continued modeling in the 1920s, which was showcased in this documentary. All right, so this reaches the end. So I would greatly like to know what you all think. So feel free to reach out to me. And the best way to do that is two ways here: email or fill up those comments on YouTube. All right, so tune in, turn up, and always take care. Bye-bye.